Hello, friends. This is Hugh once again, and I welcome you all to the At You Smiley podcast here on YouTube. And just a little request, if you enjoy the videos, please click on the little like button and subscribe to the channel, and then you'll receive notifications on future videos that we produce. So I have a very wonderful guest today who hails from very far, originally Ntambue, uh, who is originally from the Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and then South Africa, now in Canada, and has a very colorful background and relationships with different groups of people, locations. And anyway, I just like to invite you to speak and welcome Baron. Tu parles français, mais ici, on va parler en anglais.
Bien sûr.
You actually told me you speak a lot of languages, right?
Yes, I speak, besides French and English, I speak many other five African languages.
Which ones?
Swahili, Lingala, Chiluba, Zulu.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, those languages you mentioned, do they have some common origin? Like, are they related or are they completely different from each other?
Well, in terms of vocabulary, they are not necessarily related, but in terms of style and syntax,
Okay.
they have a lot of common styles and lexical structure because they are bound to languages.
Okay, so they
Yes,
are part of a family of,
a family of language. Just like in the West, we have Latin languages
yeah,
like French, English, and so on. They have the same syntax,
yeah.
but if you know one, you don't necessarily understand the other.
This is true. Yeah, when I was living in South America, I learned Spanish, and then right next door was Brazil. And the way they speak Portuguese in Brazil is sort of like Spanish. You almost understand 90% of it.
Yes.
Anyway, so happy that you are able to take the time to be with us. And we could talk, I'm sure, for hours and hours on so many themes. We've spoken before, I know about a little bit. And however, we like to keep the videos fairly short, like 20 to 30 minutes, and just because that's kind of a bite size, well, more than a bite, 2 bites, just like a snack, a meal that you could sit down with a cup of tea or coffee and, watch the whole video in one sitting. So that's why we try to keep it short and snappy. So where to start? Well, I'm going to jump right in with our kind of archetypal theme question that I ask almost all of the guests, because for me and my purpose in this podcast is to explore different approaches to consciousness, spirituality, philosophy, religion, all that kind of thing, and to talk with people about, what, for example, in your life, if there is a turning point, or it was a time or a place or an experience or an event or a relationship that sort of opened up your heart or your mind, where you had some kind of an insight or perspective and maybe changed the direction your life has gone in. Could you identify such a time or maybe more than one?
Yeah, I think there are many at different magnitudes, but the most important is when I was 15 years old because I grew up in a Baha'i family.
Oh,
So at 15 years old, I joined a set of courses uh, called the Rui Institute, which they are provided by the Baha'i community. And through that set of courses, they're usually enumerated in terms of book one, book two, and so on. So I went through those courses from the age of 15, and I developed a new view about my life and how I can become a protagonist in the social change. So that upset the foundation of everything I was able to accomplish after that, because that's very clear mindset for service to others, identifying ourselves as a world citizen and being preoccupied of the wellness of everyone was a very strong bedrock that allowed me to reshape my purpose for life, both professionally and socially.
Wow, that's a very lofty vision for a 15-year-old, right?
Indeed.
To be a protagonist for social change, is that what you said?
That's right.
That's very cool. Wow. I mean, most 15-year-olds in this culture in Canada, and oh, by the way, Baron lives in Canada now. Most 15-year-olds, all they're interested in is their iPhone or their, sneakers or buying stuff or music and just me, pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. But wow, what a wonderful world embracing vision for a 15-year-old just barely past puberty. That's very inspiring. Yeah. So you started those courses helped to instill in you, I guess, that vision of a bigger picture of not just you or your family, but the community or humanity even.
That's right.
Yeah, the whole human race.
Yes.
Okay, so you said there were several points of change or awakening.
Yes, so that was the major one. And the second one was when I was in pilgrimage in Israel, in Haifa, more specifically Haifa and Akka, which is considers the two holy cities of the Baha'is. So I had another spiritual experience that allowed me to feel more closer to the Creator. So it's brought in me a very higher sense of fulfillment and charged me, gave me enough energy to be able to face most of the challenges that we face throughout our individual and collective lives. So that was the second most important awakening moment that happened in my life. So that was around 2011.
Oh, recently then, not that recent. How old were you?
Like 14 years ago.
Okay. How old are you now?
Now I'm 40.
40. So you were
Yeah.
25 or something.
Yes.
Well, it's interesting. I was just watching something a couple of days ago about pilgrimage, the concept of pilgrimage. And of course, in the Muslim world, there's the pilgrimage to Mecca, which is a big deal. At least once in a lifetime, one is expected to try to make that pilgrimage. And and the I think it was a video. It was about in Europe in the Middle Ages. I guess that we're talking 1300s, 14, 1500s. Pilgrimage was a really big thing, and there were all over the countries of Europe. There were all these holy places, special churches and cathedrals, and places in nature, where miracles had taken place or whatever. And so people were traveling on foot, usually walking through the woods and the mountains to reach these places to say prayers and offer gratitude and so on. And then it just sort of disappeared. And Europe, of course, has become very secular now. But recently, especially with the Camino, it's called El Camino in Spain. Well, it used to start in Moscow and Kiev and London and Paris. It would go through Germany and eventually come down to this church on the Atlantic Ocean in Santiago de Compostela. And so it's become very popular, and millions of people have done this Camino pilgrimage in the last few years. So it's interesting. So just another question. Israel is in the news as usual, and there's a lot of hardship has been occurring there. Israel and Palestine. And so people may wonder, is the founder of your religion Arab or Jewish?
No, the founder of my religion, which is the Baha'i Faith, is from Persia. Persia, the ancient Iran, and his name is Baha'u'llah, which means the glory of gods, because it's believed, like in the Bible, it's believed that the return of Jesus Christ will happen under a new name, which will be the glory of God. So Baha'is believe that Baha'u'llah is the fulfillment of the prophecies from all the major religions from the past, including Hinduism, Islam, and more others like Buddhism and so on.
So why Israel?
Israel is based on the major plan of God. Those prophecies were supposed to accomplish themselves, and for them to accomplish, he had to end his life in Israel. So through the persecution, because when he proclaimed himself to be the promised one, it created a bit of turmoil in the Islamic society where we're living in Persia. And he had to go through 40 years of persecution, exile, and imprisonment, which resulted to him being sent in Israel in one of the most dangerous prisons called the prison of Acre. In French, they call it the prison of Saint-Jean d'Acre.
That's where Napoleon tried to conquer the Middle East, right?
Indeed.
Unsuccessfully, he was defeated. Yeah, Acre.
Yes, because the conditions in that prison were very severe that no one could survive. So the intention was to eliminate him physically by incarcerating him in that most dangerous prison. But by doing so, they're actually fulfilling the prophecies about the Messiah who was supposed to come. That's how Baha'u'llah ended up in Israel, and Israel became also a holy land for the Baha'is around the world.
Fascinating. Of course, in that time, I guess it was in the last century or before, it would have been Palestine, not Israel was only created recently, right?
Yes. It was politically called Palestine, but if you go in the ancient scriptures, like in the Old Testament, in the Torah, they've been using Israel as well to geographically locate that specific piece of land.
Yeah, that whole area, and I know your wife is from Egypt, correct? Cameroon?
That's right.
Not Cameroon, but Sudan and Egypt. Yeah. But that whole area of the near Middle East, it was part of the Ottoman Empire for many hundreds of years, and the Turkish, the Ottomans, and I think Palestine was a province of the Ottomans, and it was part of Syria and Greater Syria, maybe Lebanon, Syria, Jordan. It was all one province, and then the European country colonial powers, and they went everywhere, like in Africa too. And
yes,
chopped things up, and they decided to draw artificial boundaries, and it led to a lot of confusion and difficulty, political, economic. To this day, people are still sweating at it, trying to bring about peaceful dialogue and understanding. And anyway, great. Okay, well, thank you so much for that background. Now, I know that you are involved in the tech world. You're a tech executive, and we've spoken a little bit that you have a special interest and expertise in the area of AI, artificial intelligence. And this is it's almost like it's a new paradigm shift. We had the internet, and that's not that long ago, 30 years ago, maybe more or less. And then, whoa, internet, holy shit. And now AI, it's like another wave of this acceleration of technology, and also the mindset that goes along with that. So could you share, what you do? And I know that you also advocate for Black Afrocentric people to be able to enter and, this area of technology, which sometimes, because of racism, mostly, is not that open to Black people. So I'm very interested in you sharing a little bit about your entry into this field and this sort of special area that we're developing as well to advocate for.
Yeah, indeed, AI is introducing a new revolution. So, just part of that sequence of the industrial revolution, the first industrial revolution has to do with mechanization, where we had to use machinery to replace the manpower. And the second one was the age of information that was introduced by internet. So information the processing of information became the second revolution in the industrial era we are living in. And the third one is artificial intelligence, because the world have accumulated enough information to be able to train machines to perform tasks at the same level of expertise as humans, but at higher speed, because they're machines, they can do it faster than human beings. So we are actually experiencing that third industrial revolution. But it has very severe consequences on the human society because it has the potential to make the human practical intelligence useless, just like the first industrial revolution made the manpower, the physical manpower, useless. So as a consequence, we will be able to generate a lot of wealth than ever before, because we can perform tasks better and faster than human beings. So which means we'll increase efficiency, and when we increase efficiency, the return on investment will go higher. So because many Black people are prevented from getting into this space because of systemic racism, it will have severe damage on the social order, because the wealth gap between Blacks and other racial groups will go higher and higher as time goes, because Black people are not allowed to get into this space. So the solution could come if we start trying to rethink our level of engagement as a Black community into how we can participate in the economical life of the society. So we'll need to make sure that we start encouraging more Black youth to start learning and focusing on skills that are driving the economy. So we know already that Black people have been very excellent into the field of entertainment and sport, like music and sport.
That's right, yeah.
But we cannot develop resiliency as a community with just entertainment. So we need to go beyond entertainment. Entertainment is not bad, it's good because it brings so much joy to the world we're living in, but it's not enough to provide sustainability, economical sustainability to the Black community, especially in the context of North America. So we need to go beyond that. We need to encourage most of our youth to go into the STEM field.
So one part is encouraging young people when they're in high school even to consider studies and consider a career in technology and AI and so on. But then there's the other part. So people get educated, but still, if there's systemic racism, they're not going to get hired. So the other piece that I'm interested in, and I know you're involved in, is entrepreneurship, is creating businesses that are ready to go, made to measure, so to speak, so that as young people graduate from these courses and universities and so on, they'll have a place to exercise their talents and their studies. So what kind of entrepreneurial projects are you thinking about or maybe already involved with?
Yeah, so I started a startup which is still in the early stage, which aims at providing a space to people who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. So mainly Black people, but we are also open to others like the First Nations as well, who are going through the same systemic discrimination. So they can have a place where they can practice whatever they learn at university, so they can develop the expertise which will give them access to the industry, whether as professionals or as entrepreneurs. But we are trying to encourage more the entrepreneurial mindset, because for the Black community to really strive, they should be able to produce themselves into equality and not consume themselves into equality. Because the model of equality that have been promoted during the civil rights movement here in Canada and in the US in the 40s has to do with equality presented in a very, in a way, in a way of consuming what exists already. So, which means a Black person can also buy the same car as a white person, could buy the same house as a Black person, as a white person, could have access to entertainment as a white person.
Yeah.
But that level of equality, they cannot free a population, because the person who's producing will always be 2 or 3 steps ahead of you. So we need to change the mindset and empower our young people to start producing themselves into equality and not consuming themselves into it by using critical thinking and skills they learn in the tech industry.
That's a very important point that a lot of people don't realize. I'm old enough to remember the civil rights movement down in the States in the 60s, I guess. And often people were talking about the Black people had to ride at the back of the bus in Mississippi, places like that, Alabama. And I rode the bus from New Orleans up to Detroit once, and that's the way it was. The Black people were all at the back. So I went right to the back and sat with the Black people, and even gave up my seat for an old lady. But being able to sit at the front of the bus, okay, that's one kind of equality, better than nothing, right? But who has the school that trains the bus drivers, and who runs the company that manufactures the buses? That's what you're talking about, right?
Indeed. So ownership is the only way of achieving equality in a more sustainable way, and not in a very shallow kind of style.
Thank you so much for that clarification. So just before we wind down, it feels like we're just getting started, but let's take this concept of systemic racism and go over to Africa, which is your former home base, and talk about how racism manifests or has an impact still many years after the colonial powers have left, more or less. What can you say about? We were talking a little bit before about the genocide in Rwanda, and you shared something so interesting that I didn't have a clue about. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. The concept of racism, I always say it as a phenomenon that can manifest itself at a different level of abstraction. So the classical racism we know is manifesting itself at the level of abstraction where we are dealing with race. But the further we go down at a very granular level of the structure of society, which is the tribes, we can observe the same illness, the same spiritual illness, because I consider racism as a spiritual illness.
And
so we can consider spiritual illness. Illness, yes.
Illness, yeah. Okay.
Illness, yes.
Right.
So we can observe that at the tribal level, where different tribes are fighting each other, maybe for the control of the land or for power, just the same level we observe it at the racial level. So because many African countries are nothing but aggregations of tribes. So during the Berlin conference, when the European powers went to divide Africa into their own private properties, so they aggregated a set of tribes to form a country. So usually those tribes fight each other in order to for the sake of material gain most of the time. But in a country like Rwanda, it's a little bit different because the tribes that are existing in Rwanda were artificially manufactured because the very key component of a tribal structure in Africa is the language. Each tribe is characterized by the tribal language and then the geographical space they occupied. For example, my tribe is the Luba tribe, which speak a language called Chiluba, and we are from the central part of Congo. That's the region. Yeah. And we have different tribes, like the Congo tribe, where they speak Kikongo, and they're from Kikongo, and they're from the western side of Congo, and so on. So in Rwanda, they have two tribes, Hutu and Tutsis, but they speak the same language, which does not comply to the organic structure of a tribe. Why? Because they were generated artificially. So when the colonizers arrived, they start measuring the length of the nose. If your nose is beyond a certain threshold, they categorize you as a Tutsi. Yeah. If it's below that threshold, you're categorized as a Hutu. That's how it started. So it's a very artificially constructed tribe. So
incredible. So if the nose were longer or narrower, perhaps it looked more European.
Yes.
So that the English, I guess it was the English, they would favor those people just because of the physical, but it wasn't to do with ethnia, or
no, it has nothing to do with that, because they all speak the same language, which is Kinyarwanda.
So in other words, before the Europeans arrived, it was one tribe.
It was just one people living on the same land, right. Same culture, right. Same customs, same everything.
So the ones with the longer noses, they were favored by the English, and they got the good jobs, right? And
that's right.
Economic benefits, educational benefits, perhaps. And the other ones that had the shorter noses, they were the majority, and they were left out, and they got angry eventually, right, at the injustice of that, and all hell broke loose. And there was a genocide, right? And I think 1.5 million people were massacred.
That's right. So the idea behind that categorization was to apply the principle of divide and conquer. So by dividing them like that, the ones with long nose and categorized as Tutsis, they're the minority. Because genetically speaking, Africans don't have long nose. So we cannot have the majority with long nose.
So an elite, right? They became an elite with
yes.
privileges just
yes.
because of that silly aberration.
That's right. So they give them the confidence that because you have a long nose, you are like us, which means you are superior to the rest of the Africans. You have the intelligence and the leadership skills to rule them and make sure that you keep control over this piece of land. So for long, they've been empowered by the European to rule that area. And as any racial or tribal or ethnic contention, when one group is in charge, they usually tend to oppress others. So that oppression led to a first war in the 1950s That's where the first war between the Hutu and Tutsis started, and many of them ran to Congo, where they lived for very long. They gained citizenship. And the second one came in 1994, because after the first war, the Hutu took over because they are the majority. They took over, they started ruling the country. In 1994, the Tutsi group, helped by the Western power, they shot the aircraft that was carrying the Hutu president.
Yes, right.
He collapsed, he died. Then there was a revolt. The Hutu triggered the war, which led to the genocide. And the second waves of Tutsis ran again to Congo as refugees. Unfortunately, when they arrive in Congo, the same Western powers start using their presence in Congo to create another war that lasted 30 years. So right now, Congo have lost more than 8 million of people because the Western countries use the presence of Tutsi in the Congo to justify the aggression of Rwanda in Congo, to take minerals for free in the eastern part of Congo, ship them in the West to power the tech industry, which is actually doing very well in the West. So it's a very complex situation, which shows how racism or tribalism is a serious spiritual illness that we need to work together and eradicate once for all.
So when you take these four, I can see four different elements: racism, colonialism, tribalism, and materialism. And maybe there's more too, but when you put those together, you're going to have problems unless there's some kind of a spiritual vehicle, to bring people together. So you're from the Congo, and I remember I went back to university as a mature student, very mature, well, in age at least. And I graduated from Peace and Conflict Studies at the University of Toronto when I was 65 or something like that, 60. And I had a goal because I was hearing, I've always been interested in what's going on in the world, even though the main press, the mainstream press, rarely talks about wars and things in Africa. It's racism again, lack of interest. And but I was aware of what was going on in the eastern Congo, and I think at one point there were 7 different countries had armies there, and they were going through with their machetes and chopping people's arms off and raping all the women. So I thought, wow, if I could somehow get some funding and have a little station, in a town where people, because I've trained as a psychotherapist and healer, so where we can have a small staff, a nurse, a psychotherapist, and it would just be a drop in the bucket, but just people could come in for 20 minutes or half an hour and lie down or sit down and do some hands-on healing or talk to them a little bit, help them deal with the trauma that they're experiencing. But that horror continues, right? It's still going on.
Yes, it continued going on, and the world power, who usually try to advance the concept of democracy and freedom, they are very silent because it was orchestrated for a very clear purpose. After colonization, many European and American nations lost control of Africa, more specifically Congo, which is the richest country in the world in terms of mineral resources. So they had to find a way of achieving what they used to achieve during colonization. So the only way of achieving that is destabilizing the country with war. When the country is destabilized, the government does not have control over mineral resources and mines, then they could take for free through a proxy, which is now Rwanda, which is being used as a proxy. So Rwanda will have a commission for extracting it for them. They label it in Rwanda as clean minerals, and then they get shipped to France, UK, Canada, and America. So it's just perpetuation of the same colonial system that existed, but in a different way. But this time, what is said is they're using other Africans as proxies to execute a mission that is destroying the very essence of humanity. Because losing 8 millions of innocent lives, that is devastating. It's like eliminating an entire country, because there are countries that have less than 8 million people.
That's true.
Yeah, so
Belgium has 9 million. Serbia has less than that. 100.
indeed.
Yeah.
So this shows how materialism can be very dangerous to humanity, because a human who have not reached a very reasonable level of spirituality is capable of doing horrible things in the name of material gain.
Well, I've studied Buddhism a little bit, and one of the things the Buddha is supposed to have said is that at the basis of all men or women, people, there's a basic goodness. Even though we look at humanity with all its corruption and manipulation and deception and hatred and fear, but somehow if there's a basic goodness at the bottom, how can we start to manage or cope with the disruption that you're talking about, the chaos and the manipulation and the lying and the robbery, of the the neo-colonialism, I guess they call it, right? How can we, as an individual or as a family even, or a little community, a village, what can we do to help to turn the tide, at least? Try.
Yeah, I think if we observe the history of humanity, we'll realize that the only force that brought to humanity a very radical change, a change that revolutionized how people think and how societies are organized, was religion. But over time, the religion get corrupted, and the human vain imaginings, they take ascendancy over spiritual principles that are supposed to bring order and equilibrium in society. So we cannot expect science to solve the problem of these magnitudes, because science is very limited. So the only solution, in my opinion, is a renewed religion that brings in new principles, new spiritual principles that resonate the most with the reality of the society in which you are living right now. Yeah. And those set of new principles, such as the oneness of mankind, which is what is missing, because we don't, if I can kill another person because they are of a different race, so they can have enough wealth to provide good life to the people who look like me from my race, it means we haven't realized yet the oneness of mankind. We haven't realized that we are all one. There is only one race, the human race. So if I kill someone from a different color, I'm actually killing myself, because we are all one. Exactly. So a religion that can bring such principles to life, then it will release a new force in humanity. That force will be a force of integration. Will set in motion a new process that will integrate all components of the society together. While the old way of doing things, which is characterized by greed, war, materialism, racism, tribalism, will start collapsing by itself, because that model is not sustainable at all. So when the old way of doing things is disintegrating, a new way of doing things is integrating and building a new world civilization, then we can have hope in a system that works and that everyone can embrace and can bring the solutions we are looking for the world. And I can see the new pattern of integration, the process of integration, being triggered by the new principles that the Baha'i Faith have brought to humanity.
Okay. Well, that principle of unity, it seems to be catching on. More and more people are seeing the obvious reality. I mean, we are all one already, like the cells of the body. It's one body. And the divisions are artificial, of race or tribe or nationality and so on. However, as you said so articulately, that the world order, the part of the world order that is based on fear and competition and separation is falling apart. It's having a harder and harder time to stay together. At least we can see it, the collapse, while more and more people seem to be getting the idea of unity. So I think there's hope, even though there's like two processes going on at the same time. There's the dissolution of a world order that has worked, more or less, the last few hundred years, but it just doesn't work anymore. It's not functional anymore. So it's costing more and more money to keep it together, like with Band-Aids and dental floss or whatever. Whereas the new consciousness, which is not non-dual, transcending polarity, yes and no, and black and white, and up and down. But there's a beautiful poem by Rumi, the great, mystical poet from Persia and Turkey, and I can't remember the words, but it's something like that. Beyond the town, there's a field beyond right and wrong, and I'll meet you there. So in other words, let's go beyond the judgmentalism and always dividing people into groups and categorization, which is so much of the left brain, European kind of scientific. It has its charms, but I think what you're suggesting is that science, and you're very much involved in science and technology, but science needs to collaborate with spirituality, and really the religion or spirituality is just another view of the same reality, another angle, so that when these two can come back together again, like apparently they once were, thousands of years ago, whatever, but to come back together in a new way, that it's like a bird with two wings. Both wings will be strong and flap together, so the bird can be free, I suppose. And I remember I think it was earlier this morning, or yesterday, I'm not that old, I heard, or I saw a little clip on the internet that said by the end of this year, 2025, AI will be able to outperform any computer program created by a human being. By the end of this year, it's going so fast. And that's pretty wonderful and pretty scary, as you intimated at the beginning. There's like, wow, this power that's being released. And then you look at the behavior of human beings, and it seems to be so infantile and destructive. How can a human race that has this power and technology, without some kind of a guiding blueprint, a template, how to use it functionally to help people? And like you say, if we're all one, if we're all brothers and sisters, like that concept of one family, the human race, why would we want to hurt our cousins and uncle and aunt? We want to help them, right?
Indeed.
Yeah, it's the opposite. Right? Well, thank you for implanting in our consciousness some of these concepts and principles. It's been very enjoyable, and I hope that now if people would like to know more of what you're doing, or do you have a website or something like that, or some contact? I can put it in the little blurb underneath the video, or maybe you don't want to be contacted.
Yeah, I can put.
You can do it later, yeah.
Yes, we can add some contact information there as well.
Okay. Like if
Yeah.
somebody wanted to, contact, say maybe they got an idea for a black-oriented business. Are you open to
Yes,
that kind of, yeah?
indeed.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So we'll put something. Just look below where the video is showing on your screen or your phone or whatever, and please subscribe to this channel if you would be so kind. And there'll be about once a week, more or less, or once every 2 weeks, a new video interviewing different wonderful people. So you'll get a little notification when a new one comes out. You won't miss it if you want to. You don't have to. look at it, but it'll be there. At least you'll have the access. So there's a little like button and also a subscribe button. So Bertrand, merci beaucoup. It's been really great.
Je vous en prie, Monsieur Hugues. It is a pleasure for me too.
Ça ne fait rien. In the future, perhaps you'll come back again.
Indeed, it will be my pleasure to come back. Indeed.
Okay, salut.
Salut,
Merci.
bonne journée.